So then, we are back with more understanding from the time of the second tabernacle services, where we find ourselves then studying of the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of Yahweh, then giving the understanding of the time of the end as per the Yitzhayelic lineage, as we understand. Awraham had two sons, Ishmael and then Yitzhak. And then we are reading from the second portion of the anointing granted then to Yitzhak, because we understand that later the people of Yahweh would be tempted to make their own kingdom of this world, and Yahweh would not let via his first son of Awraham. And then obviously then in the future, as we understand, there is no third temple. There is absolutely no purpose, and Yahweh Yeshua already said it's not going to have any temple. The reason why, it's because what he said was true in terms of the existing temple of Herod, because the people were placing their trust in the building, and the Messiah said not a stone is going to be left upon another, because he was taken over the place of his Father in the Holy of Holies. And as we understand, the earth never experienced the autumn feast. It's time of vengeance, where Yahweh is going to do precisely as he said. Prior of the vengeance, every word spoken by Yahweh must be done. We understand Temple Mount is not going to be temple there. It's going to be a simple tabernacle of the desert. As we understand then, the 8th chapter of Hebrews, when you read, you understand. Yohanan wrote to those Hebrews in sin of those 7 cities of Asia Minor, preparing then themselves for the autumn feast. So then we understand Awraham had 2 sons, Ishmael and Yitzhak. We understand then Awraham, during the time of his pilgrimage, because he was a pilgrim, Yahweh told him to get out of Ur because it was very evil. And Yahweh then later established a relationship with him, and then a covenant was then established. But then Yahweh did not talk with him sometimes very often. Sometimes it would go a long time without any kind of a relationship in the spirit, as he received the understandings from the Creator. There were no angels that came and began then to walk on the earth and then visited in his tent. Those were understandings in the spirit while he was resting. Those were the night understandings when he was at rest. Because Yahweh never explained yet what it would take to have his presence in the earth. Prior of the time of the tabernacle, the earth was contaminated. And during the time of the first service, they had to do a certain rituals in order to come near him. So we understand Awraham did not receive any kind of a visitation from heaven via angels walking in the desert. Those were understandings shared in the spirit. So then when Awraham and his wife then later had the understanding of Yitzhak, both of them had the same dream. They had the same vision while they were then at night resting. Then they understand. So then, prior of this time, we understand then Awraham went to Egypt. Then he gave his wife away. He wanted to get rid of her because she couldn't bear children. He thought then what Yahweh had promised was a simple dream. Then he got rid of her. Then Pharaoh had a dream. At night, a vision came up to him in his dream, and he understand. He did understand. This lady belongs to Awraham. Send on his way because he's a pilgrim. And sure enough, the next day, oh boy, came Pharaoh and said, "What is this that you have done, Awraham?" So he sent out on his way and had some animals and some servants. Amongst the servants came Hagar. Later, Awraham, on his way of pilgrimage, went into Hagar. Got a son from her, Ishmael. Wasn't the son of the pilgrimage. but he was nicely treated. Thus the first son, then later, he went out and found his way and did his task for the Creator. Then we understand also Hagar went with him because she was not part of the pilgrimage of Awraham. Yahweh was a pilgrim. As we understand, then Awraham was a pilgrim, Moshe was a pilgrim, the prophets were pilgrims, Yahweh Yeshua was a pilgrim. So must we be a pilgrim if we trust Him and we understand the tabernacles. If we decide to make this world our kingdom, then the soul is lost. So then Abraham went out of Egypt. He went to Hagar, had the first son. For some time he was stationary until the boy was an adult. There was no reason to continue the pilgrimage while he had the first son. He was not the son of the promise, the son of the pilgrimage. He was stationary. The understanding is then later, then he was sent out to his way, and then Abraham continued. Then later, they had the understanding from heaven. They would have a son. And they did. They had Yitzhak. Then from Yitzhak we understand later came Esau and Yaakov. And there was no involvement of the wife of Yitzhak in terms of goat's skin and deceit. Those were literary activities. Yahweh does not have to have lying people to get his way. He simply voiced it out as Yitzhak told Yaakov. Say, you know what? Esau is evil. He's an evil hunter. He can have the promise. Come here, my son. He prayed over. He received the promise. Esau was not abandoned. He had his own share of the situation later. But the continuation went on with Yaakov. So then we find the Messiah. Yohanan then, very important reading because he's the first that was with the Messiah ever since the ministry started, 490 days of ministry, and he was on top of the Mount of Gerizim when the Messiah then transfigured himself. Then coming with the Torah outside of Jerusalem and starting his own tabernacles because it was a time to save the Gentiles. Yohanan said of the Messiah, speaking of himself, he is the vine. You are the branches. If you do not produce fruit, you are taken aside and burned. Messiah is explaining the end of this age because he was explaining of himself as being the living Torah and the tabernacling. He was taken over the place of his Father in the Holy of Holies. So when you read Hebrews the 8th chapter, Yohanan instructing then the priests of the 7 cities of Asia Minor, those cities were in sin as we understand. Then Yohanan said, the whole situation is this. We have a high priest seated then on the right hand of the power, or majesty on high. And he is the minister of the sanctuary. Gives you, he is in charge of the Holy of Holies. Not made by man. He was speaking then, it's not a tabernacle in terms of temple. It is the true tabernacle of Elohim pitched in a desert. Thus making continuation, completion of the first and starting of the second. Messiah then is in charge of the Holy of Holies. Thus went on for 1,000 years. Thus when you read Revelation, the 1,000 years of the Messiah was already gone. Then came the other 1,000 years of Nahashatan, and we are living then during the time of restoration and reduction. So the Messiah said, these, obviously regarding the set apart, we are not even speaking with Gentiles because what we read in Yohanan is not for Gentiles. The reason why the Messiah was speaking in parables is for him then to filter mixing of Gentiles and set apart. Gentiles, they had a tendency of to go after money. That's why the Messiah, you find him every time speaking of money, 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 money. And then certain leader of the land had this land, and then if you do this, you're going to earn more. You would receive more. Those who were linked up with money, they exclude themselves. Those who did understand the Messiah as the living Torah and the tabernacle, they did understand the functions would come in the future if they were loyal. So this gospel of prosperity, put the others on the line to get your conveniences and your money, be cautious, because the Messiah simply gave the parable and people exclude themselves. The Messiah said, He is the vine. You, the set apart, you are the branches. If you remain in Him as the living Torah and the tabernacle, then you understand. Apart from Him, you can do nothing. And you are then set aside for burning. He is explaining the earth when it burns at the end. Because the Messiah was directing them towards the autumn feast. That's what we are heading towards, the autumn feast. The holy cities are returning as per Yeshayahu, the 61st chapter, in order to resume this age. Is that going to be a third temple? No. Read what Yahweh Yeshua said in the 23rd chapter of Yeshayahu. Whatsoever Moses told you to do and observe, these do and observe. Is the temple part of the tabernacle? No. The temple building was a gift from David, established by Shimon. It's not part of what Moses told him to do and observe. That's the whole problem it started. It was not for them to build any building. Ezekiel, the 40th chapter, where do you think Ezekiel got the visions from the bones from? Speaking those people that died in the Messiah in the future, because He is Yahweh, you were receiving the understanding from Yahweh, and the Messiah is Yahweh. That's when the mind of those who are wicked becomes then very twisted. After some roughly 25 years after the people were taken into captivity, obviously then the people of Babylon and the people of Yahweh, they tried to make a kingdom of their own. As the world today, many denominations speaking of a kind of a Messiah, the Hebrews are involved with their own buildings over there and trying to build the temple. What was the vision then of Ezekiel? Ezekiel had a dream. In a dream, he had understanding of the vision of the capital of the new Jerusalem. It's not temple, it's the capital building of the new Jerusalem. Is there going to be a third temple? No, it's not going to have a third temple. What the lineage of Ishmael is going to let on the Temple Mount only is going to be the tabernacle of the desert. That's why Yahweh had His hand upon Ishmael to give the orders at the end. Then we understand what the Messiah was explaining from the lineage of Yitzhak. So then we understand what comes in the future as the world prepares then for the autumn feast. Plain and simple. Then there are those that like to stay on the top of the fence. They like to understand the truth, but then when they have to make a decision themselves, then to believe what the Messiah said, then as long as it doesn't intervene or interferes with their convenience in the world and how they are treated in the world, then they are for it. But when they are cornered, no. Messiah said that the world did hate him. So then those who would be enlightened by the Messiah would be hated. Yeshayahu the prophet was sawn in half. He was speaking from a time where not even the spring feast was completed, and he knew. Yeshayahu knew. Yahweh, the true Creator, he knew Yahweh Yeshua would come, complete the spring feast. He did understand the autumn feast. He did understand it would be a time of restoration. From a time where the leaders of his time did not even understand. And then came a time where they couldn't bear anymore because they felt guilty for not studying the scripture as per the instructions. And they slaughtered him. He was sawn in half. And today we are making reference of what he did understand. And in studying the restoration is spoken of by Yeshayahu the prophet, sawn in half. And there are people listening to the truth, and they simply shrug their shoulders, and they want to link up with the world.